The day the eviction notice slid across my kitchen table without a knock or a warning, I realized that quiet neighborhoods hide the loudest battles, because the paper wasn't just telling me to leave. It was telling me that decades of patience, inherited responsibility, and a piece of land that had outlived trends, councils, and fashions was suddenly inconvenient to someone with better stationery and louder confidence. And as I stared at the signature at the bottom, still dusty from deployment and not yet used to sleeping without distant engines humming in the night, I felt the familiar calm that always arrived before things got complicated. The kind of calm that comes when you stop reacting and start observing. Because Willowbrook Estates had not grown accidentally, it had crept outward like ivy, polite in tone and ruthless in intent, wrapping itself around whatever looked unattended. And while they thought my absence meant abandonment, they had mistaken silence for surrender, because long before their manicured hedges and tennis whites, my family's land had been shaped by water, agreements, and a sense of shared survival that didn't care for glossy brochures. And that was the part they never researched. My grandfather had built a small earth dam in the late 70s, not to dominate the land, but to cooperate with it, a practical structure meant to catch rain, slow floods, and share water downstream. And he documented everything with the quiet thoroughness of someone who trusted paper more than promises. So when the HOA president smiled at me with practiced sympathy and explained that the land had been reclaimed for community use, while I was overseas, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain who I was or what I knew. I simply went home and opened old boxes that smelled like dust and cedar, boxes filled with permits, surveys, handwritten notes, and a water rights deed older than the city itself. A document that didn't care about golf carts or zoning committees or sudden emergency meetings, because water remembers its path even when people pretend it doesn't. The first time I walked the property after returning, the land felt tense, as if it knew something was wrong. The creek that once fed the dam had been pinched and redirected, trickling away toward freshly poured concrete and decorative stone channels that looked natural enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. And every day the water dropped a little more, the dam shrinking not from neglect but from theft, quiet and deliberate. And when I asked questions, the answers came wrapped in soft language about safety, progress, and neighborhood standards, the kind of words that sound reasonable until you notice they always point in one direction, away from accountability. They told neighbors I was unstable, they filed complaints about noise that didn't exist, they sent inspectors who measured nothing but fear, and each knock on the door was meant to exhaust rather than resolve, because bureaucratic pressure works best when the target is tired, isolated, and embarrassed. But what they didn't realize was that years of managing water in unforgiving places teaches you to read systems, not emotions, and systems always leave patterns. I started documenting everything, the way the creek no longer followed its natural bed, the way downstream gardens dried up while ornamental ponds sparkled, the way permits had been fast-tracked while I was gone, signatures stacked on top of each other like dominoes waiting for a touch. And as I pieced it together, the picture sharpened into something familiar, a coordinated squeeze designed to make resistance feel pointless. Except water law doesn't work on convenience, it works on priority. History and use, and buried in county records, was proof that the water flowing through that land answered to agreements older than the HOA, older than the city council, older than the idea that land could be reshaped without consequence. While the HOA staged meetings and photo ops about children's safety, I measured flow rates and photographed diversions. While they posted warnings about me online, I talked to neighbors who quietly admitted their wells had dropped and their crops had suffered. And while they told the press that the dam was dangerous, I found inspection reports that praised its design and maintenance. And the more noise they made, the clearer it became that they were trying to outrun something solid. Because when development depends on pretending water will behave differently than it always has, the lie eventually floods back. The turning point wasn't dramatic at first. It was a realization that the system they had built to pressure me could be used to expose them. Because every diverted stream, every forged assessment, Every inflated insurance form created a trail that didn't disappear when voices got louder. And as agencies began asking questions they couldn't answer with smiles, the confidence drained from their meetings and reappeared as urgency, offers made quietly, deadlines imposed suddenly. Numbers thrown around, as if money could erase history, but land remembers, and so do communities when someone finally says out loud what they've been feeling privately. When seasonal rains arrived, the dam did exactly what it had been designed to do decades earlier, releasing water gradually, restoring the creek to its natural path, not as an act of defiance, but as maintenance, lawful and necessary, and the result wasn't chaos. It was clarity, water flowing where it belonged, gardens greening again, and a neighborhood forced to confront the difference between control and stewardship, because nothing exposes a bad plan like reality returning on schedule. Cameras arrived, officials arrived, and the narrative they had rehearsed cracked under simple facts, because it's hard to call something reckless when it matches historical records, harder still when those records were signed long before anyone selling perfection moved in, and as investigations widened, the polite language vanished, replaced by legal terms that don't bend for aesthetics, and the HOA's authority dissolved into what it always had been, temporary and conditional. In the aftermath, the land didn't feel victorious. It felt relieved, the creek quieter but fuller, the air less tense, and neighbors who once avoided eye contact began stopping to talk, sharing stories about rules that never made sense and notices that always seemed to target the same people. And standing there, watching water move without permission from anyone except gravity, I understood that the real story wasn't about winning or losing. It was about remembering that systems designed to manage communities fail when they forget they exist to serve them. And as the last signs were taken down and the golf carts disappeared, the land returned to doing what it had always done, supporting life quietly, while somewhere behind me someone was still trying to explain how they never meant for it to go that far. And that's the thing about pushing too hard on something older and patient. Eventually it pushes back, not with anger, but with truth. And that truth has a way of flowing straight through the center of whatever was built to contain it.